You can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious!
We speak to the great Barry Michael, who's sitting opposite us, Susan. You know Barry Michael?
I do know Barry.
Yes, you've had a little to do with him. I just wanted to mention, because Barry knew the late Ron Barassi indirectly, because he did a bit of sparring and work with him out at North Melbourne. But I just wanted to mention, which I haven't so far, I went to Ron's memorial service, which was fantastic. Some very eminent speakers there. I'm not sure why the Premier spoke, but maybe she spoke because she was paying for it. I don't know. We had a lot of people speak. Incidentally, we had 2 welcomes to country while we were there, 2 welcome to countries, and a lass, a woman, auntie someone, I don't know, she spoke, and then we had a very, very fine didgeridoo player. He played, so we had 4 cracks at welcome to country and the Indigenous. But
it was a good farewell to him, wasn't it?
That was good. I'm not sure what the relevance of all those people doing that was, but that's good. And then they said that Ron was at one with Aboriginal footballers, of course, and nurtured them. Of course, we're all at one with Aboriginal sportsmen and people. I don't know why they mentioned that. Ron maybe was at one with them because they played football for him, like everyone else. So they been on the act as well there. So that didn't matter. So that was good. What I was fascinated by at the funeral was that Ron was previously married to a woman called Nancy, who was never mentioned. She was the mother of his 3 kids. Ron Jr. spoke beautifully, fantastic, got a standing ovation at his obituary to Ron. Never mentioned his mother. I just don't understand why Ron's former wife wasn't mentioned, or someone. I didn't understand that, seeing as she was the mother of his 3 kids who were there.
Well, you spoke, didn't you?
Well, I
did say some pleasant words, didn't you?
Well, it's very easy to speak pleasantly about someone if you don't have to make it up. No, but I did a piece to camera, and some very good speakers. Sam Kekovich spoke about his times at North Melbourne. Paul Kelly spoke about his time at the Swans, and who spoke about his time at Melbourne?
But you have
Stephen Smith.
You have a lot of fond memories.
I have a lot of fond memories of Ron, and if I was going to, there was some just humorous things that Rex Hunt and I had, the great Rex Hunt. We had some fantastic times with Ron in the commentary box, but probably it wasn't a time to speak lightheartedly of Ron because it got pretty serious, but it was a very good day, as I say, I'm not sure they didn't mention about they didn't mention about who Ron was married to, and he was married to the great Cheryl, who I don't know well, but I know. So it was a very good day. So that was that. And now, just finally, before we get into, just wanted to mention quickly the shout-outs. Where's the book gone, Sue? Where have I written the shout-outs down? I wrote them down here. I've been disoriented. No, where did I write them down? God,
come on.
Fuck me dead. Where the fuck did I write them down? Here we are. Now, this is from michaelchristianmenswear.com. Now, michaelchristianmenswear.com. If you want to buy or get the You Cannot Be Serious caps or the T-shirts, there's some available, and the first 24 orders, 24 is still working in the old imperial, we're not into decimals, the first 20, it's the first 24. We will give you now, I know you're thinking that they're making light of this and this is how trivial is this, but he's going to give you a free stubby holder with You Cannot Be... How good is that?
Buy one, get one free.
If you buy anything for Christmas, what a gift that would be. You Cannot Be Serious T-shirts or caps. I don't think we've got any of the no-vote caps left, but they went out like hot cakes, as they say. So, and you get a free stubby holder if you just want to get... Mick's got Not much stock left, to be honest, but there's been a very big run on all the You Cannot Be Serious.
Why is it called stubby holder?
Because you what? Because you put a stubby in it, you don't have to wrap your hand around it.
But you could put a can in it. Why is it a stubby?
Well, a can holder, it's a stubby holder because when they bought stubbies out in bottles, instead of wrapping your hand around and making the beer warm, the stubby,
I know what
this
it's
as well
for.
as I do.
I just wanted to know the name of it.
Oh, well, like, Jesus. Thank you, Don. So we're giving a shout out to Rhett Heffernan of Tully in Queensland. Rhett Heffernan and Kate Save. Did I tell you about Kate Save's Be Fit Food?
No,
She has got specials coming out her warehouse. Coming out her warehouse specials. We are a part owner of. We're not a part owner. We're a subscriber. We're a shareholder.
Are you?
Yeah, no, because we like to put our money where our mouth is. No pun intended. But Be Fit Food is fantastic. If you are looking to,
I wonder how her challenges are going. Wasn't she on some scout to get some people in?
Yes, she hasn't told us about how her challenges are going. But Don used to pump her for information. But I haven't heard from Kate through Don. I haven't heard from Don through Don. So the doctor Ben was trying to.
I'll have to give him a project to do.
Yes, we'll give you so. So that was that. So that's Be Fit Food, and You Cannot Be Serious. MichaelChristianMenswear.com. So sitting opposite me is the great Barry Michael, and Barry is in here for a number of reasons. He probably doesn't know some of the other reasons he's in here for, but predominantly because we spoke to a bloke called Dr. Robbie Peterson. It's about the third time we've spoken to Dr. Robbie Peterson, because he's been right on to the COVID vaccines and their deleterious effects, and he's been that the COVID vaccine has had, and he's been put off social media. He's been labelled as disinformation, but what he has said has started to become absolutely common knowledge, and now he has been vindicated by his stance on all this vaccines from Moderna, AstraZeneca, and Pfizer. And we will cover this now. We'll get on to Barry Michael's the rest of what he does, because he stood for the Palmer United Party in the Senate in 2013. He had that great infamous fight with Lester Ellis in 1985. He was the IBF super featherweight title holder. He won the IBF title, the super featherweight title. He is a boxing analyst for Fox Sport, which I watch all the time when he's on. I see him a lot, him and Jeff Fennick. Don't know how he gets on with Jeff. I hope he gets on well with him, because Jeff's
Check
a good
this
bloke.
out. Have a look at that.
So this is Barry has just passed over a ring. That is a ring that you wear on your finger. It's one of those.
That's what a ring is for, to put on your finger.
Well, no one could have been a ring that you
It's
put
not
through
even
your
going to
nose.
fit on your hand.
Sam, let me tell you, it was for making 3 successful world title defences over 2 years while I was world champion. So they flew me over to Long Beach early last year to present it to me. It only took them 37 years, but I've finally got the recognition of making 3 successful defences, which is something they brought in relatively recently. So yeah, I was very honoured to be flown over and to be presented that in Long Beach, California.
So they give rings to the NFL players, don't they?
NBAs.
Don't know.
No, they give
The basketballers, or is it the...
I think they get rings. The gridiron players,
Gridiron.
the National Football League. I think they give them premiership rings, and they might give the basketballers. And I was over at a function in Tasmania with Jeff Fennick, and he was awarded you might be able to fill me in here, he was awarded a championship. He was awarded a long time after he won it, and they said that he was disqualified, or he was done out of it by a corrupt judge.
Yeah, they called it.
He explained that to me, and he was very delighted. Like, you got the ring. a long time after you were should have received it, he was given another title or something a long time after.
Yeah, it was the fight with the Zoom and Nelson, the first one, which they called a draw, which was in Las Vegas, which the famous Don King promoted it. And Jeff undoubtedly won it. And, nearly 35 plus years later, they changed the decision and
said he was
and gave it to Jeff. But, I mean, it's, to be honest with you, good luck to Jeff, but it's set up a precedent, I think, because there's been so many bad decisions in history, and we've all been on the end of them. I won in Indonesia. My dad reckons I won 11 out of 12 rounds. I thought I won 10. And I got a draw over there. That was for the OPBF title, which was a fairly significant title back then. But there's going to be, because of what happened with Jeff, there's going to be other fights that will have to be scrutinised and looked at and maybe reversed as well. And I think it's set a dangerous precedent. I think there'll be a lot of legal challenges and a lot of money, can be passed. It could cost a lot of money to look some of these boxing bodies because there's been so many bad decisions over the decades.
So I watch fights. I love the boxing, and I watch them. I watch you do it, and Jeff, and I watch the overseas ones with Lennon, what's his name, Mr. Lennon, who introduces them all, or
Tyson Fury. You see Tyson Fury's last.
Jimmy Lennon.
Jimmy's fan. Jimmy's fan. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble.
That's right. And I watch them, and you can tell if someone's winning a fight, and I say that's one, and suddenly they say it's, and you think, how does that happen? Just from the layman watching it, and the problem is that people, if someone's from Mexico, they have a Mexican judge, and if someone's from America, they have an American judge. And how do you make sure that you have an unbiased people that aren't got at or bribed?
Exactly. It's very frustrating. It
happens in all sport.
But in boxing, it's a 2-horse race. You only have to get to one person. You don't even have to get to say someone. And I was approached to throw 3 or 4 fights, which I told them all to get stuffed well and truly because it disgusts me, to be honest. And any fighter that lays down, I just can't understand it. To be honest.
So you were approached to throw some fights, and I presume there was some big money in it for you to do that?
The biggest offer was when I was world champion, it would have been about 85 or 86. I just defended against Mark Fernandez, who was number 4. I knocked him out in 4 rounds at Festival Hall. He'd just beaten Rod Sequenin. And how can I put this? This promoter from Europe came to Australia to watch me fight, insisted on taking me out for lunch afterwards, and made me a couple of offers, one on the level to fight his fighter in Denmark, and to leave the title in Denmark, but told me
lose the fight in Denmark so that the title holder was, and then give you a rematch.
No, we didn't. No, because his fighter couldn't even make the weight anywhere near what the super featherweight division was. He offered me $300,000 US paid in
when?
In 1985 or 6.
A lot of money.
A lot of money, yeah. Probably about $3 million now.
Yeah.
It was tempting, but I just couldn't consider it.
So when you say it's tempting, so you could lose the fight, and then would that be on the proviso, or there was no proviso that you could fight again for real and win the title back?
He said, my boy cannot beat you. He said, I came here expecting to see a tired old fighter because I was 31 at the time. And I was, I blasted Fernandez out of there quickly, which I thought was going to be a very tough fight. And he just was very honest. He said, I know you've never been knocked off your feet. You can retire in the corner. You can say you've got a busted eardrum. I'll have a doctor verify. He had everything covered.
Wow.
But he said, my boy can't make the weight. The weight limit was 58.95, which was a nightmare for me too. I said, what's the lightest he can make? He says 63.5. But the scales would have been figged. Everything was going to be rigged. And but I had to leave the title in Denmark.
So Barry, there's an old saying, we're only talking about the price now. Everyone has a price. What would they have offered you to throw the fight?
What would they? What do you mean?
What would you have accepted? What would you have actually seriously thought about? So if someone said, we'll give you $1 million.
I don't think I could have done it. It was just seriously against my principle.
And of course it is, Barry.
My 3 biggest offers were to throw fights. I can mention one other, which was Lucky Guadalari in the 70s. He made a comeback, and I was getting $1,500 to defend the Australian title, which was about standard back then. He offered me $15,000 after the weigh-in to lose to him, and I told him to F off.
Well, you would.
I dropped him a couple of times, and he quit in the corner. So, and he's recently just got out of jail, I believe. Too.
So I'm only being the devil's advocate here, Barry. But
I understand what you're saying.
no, I'm only
Sam.
being the devil's advocate. So if your profession and you are a star, and that is your trade, and you want to capitalise on your trade, and someone says, "Oh, I'll give you a lot of money to throw a fight, or just to sit and say you got a busted eardrum, or you're not feeling well, or something," and you say, "Well, I may as well use what I'm good at to set myself up." That wasn't my last fight. If I could come back and redeem myself, no one would know that you threw the fight, but I'd come back and re-challenge the person and win it back.
Morally, I couldn't do it.
No, you couldn't.
I couldn't.
Of course.
I just couldn't do it.
Happens a bit?
It does happen. As I said.
Still?
Yes, yes, it does, and I won't go into that too much. But
no, we won't for obvious reasons. But it happens quite a bit, does it?
Yes.
And would we? So these might be some of the fights that I say. How did that man lose that fight, or that woman? How did that person lose that fight? And that might have been one of the times then someone was got at.
Yeah, I've seen. Over the decades, I've seen quite a few fights that I've thought, well, that's dubious, and something's gone on behind the scenes there, and it's undoubtedly true. But again, you're trying to prove it and trying to charge someone over it is another thing. It wouldn't be easy.
Are you
Is there any ramification if you don't take up the fight? Have you had any recourse or anything from it?
What do you mean?
When you say no, obviously you tell them to go.
No, not at all.
They don't do anything. They don't follow up or anything.
No, because the guy that I was offered to fight in Denmark wasn't even anywhere near the rankings at my weight, and it wasn't a mandatory contender. I didn't have to fight him for anything. If you had the only time you have to fight someone is when someone gets to number one. You have to fight the number one probably once a year. You can end them after you beat him. You can. And I fought my first defence. I fought in Darwin. I fought Jinsik Choi, who I think he had 19 fights.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Had 17 KOs or something. I signed for 140 grand. The promoter's name was Ian Crawford from South Australia. After the fight, I knocked the bloke out in 4 rounds, but he hit me with some bombs, and he retired after the fight. The promoter, I never saw him again. He got off a plane in Adelaide and said, "I'll be in the solicitor's office next week to settle up." Never saw the prick again, excuse the French. And he bankrupted himself and sent me a cheque for 5 grand. So I loved Darwin while I was there, but I've never been back.
Is that right? So
Yes.
the man
Dudded me, well and truly.
So I suppose.
And I've got to tell you this, Sam, this true story. The great Leo McDonald, who was one of my management team, I was managed by some colourful identities at that stage. Let's say Spider Holman, Leo the Lout McDonald, Leo Berry, and a guy called Jeff Patterson. There's a book on his called What a Life, The Life and Times of Jeff Patterson. They did a lot for me, and they put pressure on him, and he went underground in Adelaide, and he was. Let's see, how can I put this? He was growing a hydroponic crop, and he used to, Leo, who passed away last year, used to ring me, and I used to meet him in different pubs, and he would show me what was going on with this, this payment which was coming, and what Crawford was doing, and fortunately, one of my sparring partners was a senior, very high-up policeman, and he found out that I was on the verge of being charged with conspiracy to traffic. I mean, I had nothing to do with it. I was just trying to get my money.
Yep.
And he said, "No, Barry's got nothing to do with it. He just wants his money." So they arrested the guy, and that was the end of it. There was never any more talk of me getting paid again.
So is he still on the scene, Mr. Crawford?
Never ever. He's dead. He died.
He's dead. Well,
He
that's
died.
thankfully.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, well, that's right. So
Fascinates me on who, like they call them matchmakers.
Yep.
And when they put fighters with fighters. And it's an interesting one where I think sometimes the matchmakers put on fights they know that they're fighters. That's a rort too, isn't it?
Well, to be honest with you, and I won't mention any names, but there's too many. I love going to a boxing promotion where I know the fights are well matched.
Yep.
You're going to have great fights, but there just seems to be this this trend over the last decade or so where they just build fighters up fighting dud after dud. You know,
Yep.
you can go tick, tick, tick. I know every winner before start of the show, and it's really not a good thing.
The biggest insult is to the audience. I watch, as I say, I'm a very keen boxing fan, and I watch it, and you can tell after 30 seconds, this is quite ridiculous. This bloke, one of them can't fight, and that's an insult to the people.
It is.
Well, mind you, if you don't pay to watch it, that's different, but if you just watch the boxing, you think, well, you just turn it off.
People do pay big money to go to the fights live, and they deserve better sometimes. I mean, it's a trend that I really can't stand. And there's, in the old days, like when I was fighting, when I was in my 20s, and before I got the opportunity to fight for the Commonwealth and other titles, you'd take fights against anyone, anywhere, because there wasn't much happening at home. These days, these fighters don't want to go out of their own town. They don't want to fight they pick and choose their opponents, and their records are padded until they finally have to step up, and then they get stiffened, they get beaten.
They're a bit precious nowadays.
Yeah, it's.
So you said, so no serious fighter like Tyson Fury, they would not even contemplate fighting someone unless the money was in the bank before they fought, or is that not realistic to say that?
The money, the majority of the time, they work on a guarantee up front plus a percentage of pay-per-view sales. So quite often you wouldn't know how much it's going to be. But someone like Tyson Fury, he's just making incredible money. I don't know if you saw his last fight, but he looked terrible. I still thought he won it, but he was dreadful, and he got knocked down against Nagano, who was a UFC champion. And I think you'll probably see a rematch. And it wasn't Tyson Fury, who was well overweight, and he's a well-known party animal. He thought it was going to be an easy fight, I think. I actually met him when he was out here for the Joseph Parker fight, and seemed like a very nice chap. Quite humorous, and a great fighter when he's at his best.
So you are an analyst or an analyzer. You analyse fights on for Fox.
Yep.
Do they ever tell you? So if you think that decision, do they ask you not to be too tough on the decision, or could you have free carte blanche to say, well, that is ridiculous?
No, they're pretty free with us, and if we think a decision is wrong, we'll and Jeff pretty outspoken.
I saw Jeff say that one day. Not pretty recently. He said, "I tell you, I have this is ridiculous. That is just wrong. That decision."
Well, what happened a couple of months ago? One of Jeff's fighters got cut, and it was if the fight only had to go another 30 or 40 seconds, and it would go to a decision rather than be a win to the other guy. And Jeff, the doctor, was going to stop it, and I was sitting next to Dr. Lou Lewis, who's been the doctor for a long time. He goes, this doctor doesn't know what he's doing. And Jeff copped a lot of flack because he basically jumped in and said to the doctor, let me do it, I'll fix it. And the doctor bowed to Jeff's wishes, and a lot of people thought that was seriously wrong. But his fighter ended up getting the decision, which was correct, was the way it should have gone. So, and he did the right thing, even though he did probably overstep the mark. But the doctor was in the wrong to start with. Yeah. So, where do you take that one? The doctor was wrong, and Dr. Lou Lewis said to me, this doctor doesn't know what he's doing. So Jeff did the right thing by his boxer, which is what you always try to do.
Now, what about the old chestnut, drugs in boxing, whether they be recreational or performance enhancing? Is that pretty well policed, or is it people just sort of...
Only in world title fights or major title fights. I was drug tested maybe half a dozen times as champion. But I was offered, when I was in the UK, I was offered basically, roids that I was told would have increased my physical strength by up to 40%. I thought, oh, shit, I'll be throwing them out of the ring. But there's no way known I would do that either, which, again, it sickens me if you have to do that to enhance yourself. I mean, get yourself in the best possible physical and mental condition you can, but not drugs.
But there are other types of medication that you can use during... Is there even things that do things or enhance your awareness or stops bleeding or something like that? There's certainly some things out there, isn't there?
Bleeding, I mean, there are legal drugs, to stop... And I had I've lost 300 or 400 stitches in my face and plastic surgery twice. And, I was never ever stopped on cuts because my dad was brilliant at stopping the cuts, all with legal stuff, adrenaline and the right compression spots. But, it's all sorts of things go on in boxing, and steroids undoubtedly are used by various fighters over the years, and a lot of them have been brought undone. But, again, it's something that I really, turn my nose up at. It disgusts me, to be honest. If you're not good enough to win on your merits, you shouldn't be in there.
From when you were competing to where today's boxers are, is obviously there's been a bit of a change. And if there is something, what is missing out of today's boxers that you guys did in your era?
Probably, as I said before, the evenness of proper matchmaking, and it's good to see. Like next week, I'm going to go up and do the Nikita Tszyu Dylan Biggs fight. Now this is a good fight because they're both undefeated. Once someone's O will go. Nikita, I think, 10 wins, 7 knockouts, and Dylan Biggs is undefeated as well.
Where's that?
It's in the Hordern Pavilion, I think.
Yes, that's Adelaide, isn't it?
No, Sydney.
Sydney, is it?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think it's the Hordern Pavilion. It's definitely in Sydney anyway.
That's pay-per-view?
20 seconds, pay-per-view, yeah. It's going to be a really good fight. Two even fighters. But evidently Dylan Biggs, who I've watched, and he's a very good puncher, he evidently dropped or knocked down Nikita in a gym spar in the last couple of years, and evidently had him in a lot of trouble. So a lot of good judges think that Dylan Biggs is going to win this fight. Nikita can be nailed. Look, I love watching Nikita Tszyu. He's a real character, and he's got huge heart. His last fight against Jack Brubaker, he was headbutted severely, and they called it a knockdown. Had this massive lump on the side of his right on his temple.
Oh, I watched that.
Yeah, and then he got hit with a bomb of a right hand. He wobbled badly, but then he just dug deep and came back and stopped the guy. So
he did.
I think Nikita will get over Dylan Biggs. A lot of people think Dylan Biggs is going to win this fight, but I'm going to. And the Tszyu, one thing about the Tszyu camp, they are meticulous in the way they prepare for anybody. They study everything. They're just like scientists when it comes to boxing. They know exactly what they're doing. And I don't think Nikita would be taking this fight unless they thought he was ready to go to the next level.
Now, I don't know if this is apocryphal or not, which whether this is sort of just folklore, but I was at a function with Jeff Fennick over in Tassie, and he was speaking, very good, he was good, very entertaining. And I don't know if this is right or not, but he said this publicly, so I'm not, and he said that, was it Mike Tyson, didn't they were after a urine sample, didn't they brought someone else's urine in, and Mike was pretended to urinate into the whatever it was, and they
so he's saying that Mike was on the gear, yeah?
I thought
well,
he
more or less is,
I thought he said Mike, unless it was a story that was just a bit exaggerated for, because I remember thinking, shit, that's extraordinary.
I have heard that done. I've heard of urines, urine being swapped because they do take urine samples.
Yeah.
And I've heard that
I'm not speaking out of school because Jeff mentioned this I hope it was Mike Tyson. Sure it was Mike Tyson because he knew Mike got on pretty well.
Well, him and Mike got on extremely well.
Yes, it was him.
It was funny because quite recently, Mike Tyson came out and made a comment about how Lester Ellis was the greatest fighter he's seen from Australia. So I don't know whether him and Mike are still as close as they used to be because I thought that was a bit of a shock to me. It was a real shock to me. Someone told me about it, and look, and Lester was a great fighter, and Lester would have loved to have fought Jeff the same as I would have loved to have fought Jeff, and Bill Morty just insisted it was never going to happen.
You had a few knocks to the head, obviously. You've got any CTE? You think you might be starting to twitch there?
You had 60 fights?
60 professional fights. I worked it out here. Let me read these statistics.
But you've come out pretty relatively unscathed.
I'm pretty lucky. To be honest with you, I got kinged on the street by some junkie about 7 years ago because my wife was shopping before Christmas, and there were 2 dogs, 46 degrees it was a week before, 2 dogs tied to a pole with no water. We bought some water for them. I was patting them, and all of a sudden I hear, and we'd been out for a big lunch. We'd had a very big lunch. I'd drank quite a bit of wine, and this bloke come up and said, "Get away from my dogs or I'm going to smash your face," and threatened the 2 of us. and I ended up saying to him, mate, if you're going to, and he came towards me, he was going to, all I remember he had scars all over his face, and I just said, mate, the last thing I said to him, I said, if you attack me, you might get a surprise because I'm an ex-professional boxer. Well, from then on, it was a blur until I finished him off. But when I looked at the footage from the police, he threw a left hook at me and I pulled away and he stepped in, he hit me flush in the eye with his right hand, and you can see the size of this pupil. I never used to have to wear glasses after 60 fights. I've lost about a third of my vision, but I ended up seriously beating the crap out of him. And
did you?
Yeah, threw the security blokes out the way and really did a job on him. And he, staggered away with his dogs, and the police looked at it and said, "It's obvious he provoked you and attacked you, but you went too far." I said, "Mate, have a look at my eye. There's nothing I can do about it." I went to crimes compensation. My lawyer said to me, "This bloke will never," and the police reckon they couldn't find him. Which I thought was unusual. And my lawyer said, "Barry, I've watched the video." He said, "This guy will never be the same," because I did do a job on him in the end, and said he'll never be the same. Forget about suing him because he'll have nothing and he'll sue you. So, it was just unfortunate after all those fights. But, I worked it out, and I wrote a thing down here, Sam. It was quite a bit of a shock. But I fought 7 3-rounders, 1 4-rounder, 5 6-rounders, 2 8-rounders, 24 10-rounders, 9 12-rounders, 11 15-rounders.
11 15-rounders.
11 15-rounders. And I would have sparred virtually America, Europe, Wales, England, Ireland, Italy, Hawaii. I lived there for a while, had a couple of fights over there. Tasmania, it was my first overseas fight. So, I basically fought all over the world, Indonesia 5 times. I would have sparred, I've worked it out, a minimum of 50,000 rounds, I reckon. And I'm still sparring a bit now, to be honest, even after a triple bypass, which I had nearly 2 years.
We're just going to get onto that in a minute. We're just getting this other stuff out. So were you ever... were you ever scared, or were you ever reticent to fight someone? And then you thought, geez, I'm going to get a beating here, or no? You
probably scared's not the right word, but certainly reticent.
Yes.
Maybe not reticent either, because if you're trained for a fight. I mean, when I fought Al Carter, a black American they bought out, he'd beat Tommy Hearns and Aaron Pryor in the amateurs, and when I fought him, he had 24 fights, 23 wins by knockout, and the winner was supposed to get a shot at the world title. And I beat him in an absolute war. No one ever hit me as hard. He had me hurt in the first round. He had me really seriously hurt in round 8, but I never went down. I finished over him in the last 2 and won the fight. Tough fight, yeah. But before the fight, so many of my friends thought I was going to get seriously hurt because he was just smashing everyone. But you sign on the dotted line and you've got to give your best, and that's the way it is.
So speaking of that, tell me honestly, when you saw Muhammad Ali face up to George Foreman in that was called the Affair in Zaire or whatever it was, did you honestly think no one in the world would have thought Muhammad Ali
I'll be honest with you, I was 19, I was in the UK with my parents, and I backed Ali.
Did you?
Yeah, I just thought he just had something special.
Well, he had something special.
Incredibly special, and George is great, and I've met George, I've interviewed George on two occasions, an absolute gentleman. In Melbourne, I interviewed him in Melbourne twice here. Incredible fighter, but Ali just had that something special, and I knew he would find a way to win, and he did. Yeah.
That I remember.
He always found a way to win. He
watched
was
them all: the
smart.
Affair, the Rumble, and the Thriller, Manila Affair in Museum. And
I trained at the Fifth Street Gym in Miami quite a bit. I trained alongside Angelo Dundee. I used to stay at his brother's house, Chris Dundee's house. Chris was in love with my first wife, I think. He used to, let me drive him around Miami Beach, and I've seen a lot of things in the Fifth Street Gym, and spoken a lot to the great Dundee brothers, and who trained Muhammad Ali and trained Sugar Ray Leonard and a million other great fighters. So I've sort of been close to it and seen. One of the things I saw was Jeff Sims, who, if you Google Jeff Sims, he was shot on either 5 or 6 different occasions before he was murdered. His family didn't want to be around him because he attracted lead, they said. Well, he actually split Muhammad Ali's jaw mouth, sorry, when Ali wore a moustache for a while. He split him right from there right up to his nostril. But Ali, Dundee told me that before Ali retired, after he beat Fraser in the one in Manila, he should never have fought again.
No.
He had 5 more fights and ended up losing to Trevor Berbick, who wouldn't have carried his bag. And, you know, he just was a shot fighter. And Angelo said to me he was showing signs of early onset Parkinson's or whatever. And look, basically he was punch drunk in the end. He was slurring his speech, which is a side effect of too many punches to the head. But they kept pushing him in there. I'm not going to come into any religious aspects of it, but he was being bled, basically.
Pushed by the urges, the Muslim Brotherhood.
Well, I'm saying nothing, but it was just terribly sad that he had those last 5 fights. If he hadn't had those last 5 fights, I truly believe he'd probably still be here now.
Do you?
Yeah.
So did you get on? It's a war when you face up to people and you try and belt this living shit out of them. Did you get on with all the people, or was there some lasting animosity with some of the people you fought against, or did you usually become reasonably...
virtually everyone I fought, even fighters from overseas, even a few that I lost, I'm still in contact with. I still speak occasionally to Juan Jose Jimenez, who beat me in Indonesia in about 1976 when I was about 21, and he was about 28 or 29 and was on a 30-fight winning streak, and I went 10 rounds with him. I knew I lost the fight, and I said, "You won the fight before the decision was announced." And he said to me, "You, piano, slowly, a campion del mundo." He said, "You'll be champion of the world." And I went to Italy and trained with him over there and sparred with him a lot. But so nearly all the fighters I fought, including Lester, Graham Brooks, Joe Gibalisco, hundreds, so many names, and guys that I sparred, a very tight-knit community. I just came back from Sydney on the weekend. I went up for the veteran boxers annual get-together, and I caught up with guys that I fought 37 years ago, and, it's just terrific. There's a real camaraderie amongst boxers.
Is that working?
It is.
What's happened to that?
Because you touch things. You did it,
what did
Don.
I touch then?
You touched the thing, but it's all right. Just leave it. It's working. Just don't touch
technology.
it. Technology. He's a shocker.
So I had a few of my major injuries away from the football field. I got run over and punched at my doorstep.
Oh, yes.
But Mr. Gingitano, he finished your career? Or
it was a... What happened was, when I fought Lester, by then...
85?
July 12, 1985, Alphonse Gangitano and some of his crew had basically taken over the Codsita, the management and promotion of Lester, and he was like their heavy. And I had no issue with Alphonse, long story, but my crew and his crew punched on outside Mickey's Disco about 10 years before they actually got me in Lazars and what they did to me in Lazars. But I never had an issue with him. We used to shake hands. But after I beat Lester, I had 2 defences in Australia. I then went to the UK for my 3rd defence. And then I couldn't get a fight. I came home to spend some time in Australia because I was homesick. And I took a young mate of mine to see Jeff Fennick fight Tony Miller. And my first wife, Sandy, probably the most expensive one. But anyway, we went to the fight, and afterwards we got invited to Lazars, and a bottle of champagne came over and said, "Oh, this is from Mr. Gangitano," and I waved to him, sort of thing, and they said, "Oh, he wants to speak to you." So eventually I went over and sat with him and spoke to him, and he was coked off his head or flying or whatever, and it got a bit nasty a couple of times, but it ended up, I'm not coming good, because I was always willing to give Lester Ellis a rematch. For a long time I copped it whenever I'd go anywhere that I wouldn't give him a rematch, which was never true. Lester, 30 years later, finally said he never wanted a rematch. I always had his number and I always would have beat him. So Lester didn't want the rematch. I would have taken it because it would have made me a really good purse, it would have been a dangerous war, which Lester was a vicious puncher. But anyway, Ganjitano, I was shaking his hand saying, we'll get together with those other guys who I was no longer managed by, which were the ones I mentioned before, next week, and we'll sort this out. And my first wife, all of a sudden, she started screaming, these dogs, they've just knocked Simon out coming off the dance floor, who was 21. They just tapped him on the shoulder and knocked him out. And I turned around for the first time in quite a while, and I was surrounded. And with all these guys with death in their eyes, at least half a dozen of them. And first thing I thought was, I'm dead. And Ganjitano jumped me, pinned me on a chair or couch or whatever, and latched onto my right cheek with his teeth, tried to bite my cheek off. I'd never got off the couch. They just hammered the shit out of me. Chopper Reed was there. Chopper thought I would never be the same, wouldn't be able to walk and talk again after the beating I copped. And he told me that they smashed me with one of those big glass ashtrays across the nose, because my nose was under this left eye. I had ring marks on my head. It was, and eventually I remember a security guy sitting on me saying, "Stop, you'll kill him," because they were still whacking me. I never threw a punch. I never got to throw a punch. Anyway, I got pushed out the front and blood was streaming everywhere. I remember patrons screaming, etc. Got to the front door. The security were definitely part of it or complicit with it. Pushed me out the front, and I remember saying to my first wife, I remember exactly what I said. I said, "Take me to hospital. I've got to go to hospital, but I've still got the world title." But I had it for 4 months later. I wasn't the same. I had to have my nose rebroken and constructed. Every time I got hit, it hurt and it would bleed. And then in my last fight with Rocky Lockridge, who was a great fighter, Rocky Lockridge, one of the greatest I ever fought, he broke it in the first minute of the first round. Busted my right eardrum in round 2, which that was okay. That had been busted 4 times before. This one had been busted about 9 times, my left one. At one stage they had to graft an eardrum in because it wouldn't heal. Anyway, and then he just kept pounding me on this side of the head, which filled full of blood. But I wasn't the same after the beating. I was just missing punches by a little bit. I think it had taken the desire out of him, but maybe a little bit more. But anyway, at the end of round 8, I walked back to the corner looking like Quasimodo, and he'd hit me with a body shot just before the bell, which made me pass blood as well, which was the first time the first time I passed blood was Lester, the second time was Lockridge. And my dad said to me, "Enough, son," and I said, "Bloody oath," and that was it. So I never fought again after that. I would have come back to fight Jeff. I was never ever offered a serious, honest fight. I was offered a few shifty ones, and I just wouldn't be involved in that. But after I retired, which was August the 9th, 1987, when I lost to the great Rocky Lockridge, who's no longer with us, ended up dying after a stroke and had serious drug problems with cocaine, etc. And I actually sent money over at one stage and got him into a rehab facility, and he came good for a couple of years, which was good. But I never fought again after that. But I'm still heavily involved with the sport. This T-shirt I've got on is Stephanie Mafongwat, who's a Cameroonian girl who I manage, who clearly beat the girl that beat Taylor Harris, clearly beat her over 6 rounds. This girl has just had another child, so she's going to be out for a little while, but she can remember the name, Steph Mafongwat.
When you say clearly beat, it wasn't given the decision?
No, she got the decision, yeah.
Oh, she got the decision.
Got the decision against the girl that clearly beat...
I see.
Yeah. So she's a gun. But I manage a few fighters. I've got a young boy in Mildura, Connor Reed, who just had a big knockout win the other night.
Yeah.
And we're looking at a bantamweight title fight for him.
I heard the name, Connor Reed.
But he's a real good prospect. But yeah, boxing's booming at the moment in Australia and worldwide.
Even female boxers.
Female boxing,
what are the 2 female girls that are having in December 6th, I think, isn't it? They're having a fight over in the US. And they're like the sexiest girls. They get in their bikinis or they fight in very little, and the US people, they just love them.
Honestly, women's boxing, I back in the old days, because I'd been robbed a few times when I was younger, my dad and I started promoting my own fights at Williamstown Town Hall, and it's going back in the 70s, I guess it would have been, or maybe very early 80s. We were basically forced by the Equal Opportunity Board to put on a women's bout. We were one of the first to put on a women's bout in Williamstown Town Hall, and it ended up a disaster because Jack Rennie had this quite a big German girl who could fight, and she fought a rather tubby girl who vomited in the ring, and it looked terrible, and I got really bad publicity about it. And I was a little bit anti-women boxing then, but since then I've trained some of the greats like Di Prazak, but the greatest female that Australia for me has ever had is Susie Ramadan. We took her to a couple of world titles, and when she actually won the WBC world title, she actually beat a female that was, how can I put this, potentially a hermaphrodite.
An hermaphrodite, yep.
Yeah. A month later, there was a photo of her with facial hair and wearing a suit with her arm around her girlfriend. And Susie beat her on points in an absolute war to win the WBC world title. Susie Ramadan was, I think, the best female we've had. But you've got Shanika Johnson, who's beat Susie. Susie's 40 plus now, but Shanika's a quality fighter as well.
Sugar.
We've got some real good female boxers at the moment.
I don't. I can't warm to women's boxing. Nothing to do with nothing to do with that. I just can't warm to it.
Yeah, it worried me early, to be honest, about potential injury. But when you see some of these girls, I mean, I watched Emmanuel, what's her name, Serrano, not Emmanuel Serrano, Katie Taylor versus Serrano. Anyway, it was incredible world championship fight, as good as any bloke's fight you've watched.
That's right. Step out here and they'd beat the living suitcase out of you. I mean, it's nothing to do. It's like golfers.
I understand a lot of people,
I can watch,
but it's becoming more and more popular. And now I think is it Victoria? I think we've just moved to, because men fight 3-minute rounds. And women have been fighting 2-minute rounds, but a lot of the women want to fight 3-minute rounds. And I think it's Victoria might be the first state that have, or it's either Victoria or New South Wales, one of the states has changed it to 3-minute rounds for women's boxing, which I think is probably a good idea. And I'm 100%, 110% behind them now because they train the same, they spar, and they do a great job. So
no difference in rules or anything. No, you can't hit them low.
No,
can't hit them in the what do they call it? The pod? Or no, what are the? So it doesn't matter. No, such everyone has any woman ever been cautioned for hitting low?
Well, I'm sure it's happened. But it's not the same as hitting a man low, is it?
It's not hitting the plums and giving the bells a jangle. No.
Yeah, but no. Look, women's boxing is booming, and I'm 100% behind it now.
Now, just before, I want to ask you one more question.
Anyway, let me just finish with something.
Yes, go ahead.
That beating in Lazars finished my career. Ganjitano and that. And years later, I met the owners of Lazars who said, why didn't you sue us? But at the time, there was people being bumped off left, right and centre, and I didn't fancy someone in my family potentially getting knocked off, so I never did it. But they finished my career for sure.
And, of course, the cowards got their comeuppance. He got dealt with anyhow, didn't he?
He did, yeah. I don't think any of them are with us still. No. They're all gone.
So speaking of Lester Ellis, you are doing some gigs on the road with him besides your commentary and sparring and all what you do. You're doing the tour, the speaking tour with Lester. That must be an experience.
We've just started it, and look, Lester's been fantastic. We had a weekend in Mildura where we went and trained, and Lester is terrific with the young kids. He jumped in with all these young kids, was taking them through punches, and we went to the amateur fights. We spoke at 2 different functions, and Lester was brilliant. He did a great job, and he was well. And it was, I think, with him, I was sort of prompting him and asking him certain things, and he did a great job. And ever since then, we're now starting to get some serious bookings. So if anyone wants to contact me or Lester, they can ring me on 0413 654 999. Bruce Eva's also part of our team. He's
Bruce Eva
going to work as the MC on
0413
654 999. But we've got a few bookings coming up. I believe Graham Brooks is working on one in Alice Springs for us. And Lester said to me after we'd had a terrific day at a couple of gigs and made some really good money and met some terrific people, we were back in the bar at about 11:30 that night having a drink, and he goes, Baz, why haven't we been doing this for the last 30 odd years?
Exactly, yeah.
I said, yeah, good idea. That's good, a good
And
question.
so through the course of doing these gigs, you've learnt some interesting things about Lester, in that you thought he'd bought some livestock, he'd started a farm, but it turned out to be not quite the livestock that people would associate with farmers.
No, he bought 24 camels.
Why did he
Why
buy
did he
them?
buy 24 camels? Because Lester's obsessive compulsive. At one stage, he had 100 ferrets.
Ferrets?
Ferrets. Now, 2 ferrets is enough to stink your house out, but 100. But Lester, you go to Lester's house, and when he looks after his pets, dogs, he's got a few whippets at the moment. He's got 100 pigeons. He doesn't do things in small ways, but they're always immaculate, and his house is immaculate. He's obsessive compulsive in a lot of ways, Lester, but he does a great job. He just loves his animals. He loves fishing. He's a very outdoor type of bloke, Lester.
So why did he buy the camels, Barry?
Why did he buy the camels? He just loved the animals, and then a few days later, after he had them on his property, he got a knock on the door, and it was the police, and they said, Lester, do you own all these camels? He said, why? He said, they've got out, they're all walking down the freeway single file. So, had to go and round them up.
So, Barry, you had some bad experience with the COVID situation. I know it's been well documented, but it's knocked you about, and you're on not a crusade, but so we had Dr. Robbie Peterson on here, who spoke voluminously about just the dangers of all this and how we've been hoodwinked.
Yep.
And people have been put off the social media for the conspiracy theorists and for misinformation, but that's all starting to do a full circle. It's starting to come back to bite them on the bum, the people who have been warning us.
Certainly is, and AstraZeneca, which I had 2 jabs, is now banned in Australia for causing blood clots and low blood platelets. My wife, who passed away May 7th from a brain tumour, she had 3, told her not to get the 3rd one, and not long before she passed away, she said it's karma what's happened, because I didn't listen to her. Right from the time she had the tumour removed, she had blood clots right throughout her body and extremely low blood platelets, which meant she couldn't fight any infection. I lost track of the amount of transfusions she had. But with me, I had my first jab on the 8th of September 2021, and the doctor told me I had a little bit of blood pressure and cholesterol was a little bit high, but I had no blockages. I had an angiogram because I got chest pain. Yet, just over a month later, the 23rd of October, I had the second one. And then a few weeks after that, I was playing 8-ball at a mate's place, and he said, are you okay? And I said, why? He said, you're struggling to breathe properly. And I said, yeah, and I've got pain in the chest. So I ended up going to the doctor, and they just said, look, you've got high blood pressure, we've got to get you in for an angiogram. And all of a sudden, I've got 3 blocked arteries. Whereas, 5 weeks before I didn't have any blocked arteries. I might have had a bit of blood pressure and a bit of cholesterol. Didn't have any blocked arteries. All of a sudden, I've got 3 blocked arteries, 2 at 95%. And if you have a look at the,
Yep,
you
I've seen them.
You can see the clots in the corners. So my blood clotted on me, which is now people are suing AstraZeneca for causing this. And I have no doubt. I was still weeks before this. I was still training, still sparring. And when this all happened, they they took me into Royal Melbourne, told me they were going to put 3 stents in me and morphine me up. And they said you can watch us do it if you want to actually insert the stent. So I said I would. And I'm pretty deaf, so I'm laying there and I'm watching my heart on the screen, and all the doctors are talking, and I'm laying there wondering, waiting for them to do something. And all of a sudden they're wheeling me out. And I said, what's going on? And they said, nah, the doctors have decided they're too severe, the blockages. We're putting you in an ambulance to Cabrini for a triple bypass. So then I did seriously shit myself, to be honest, because, they took the vein from my left arm from there to there, 2 out of my right leg, and I've got the massive scar down the middle. And look, to be honest with you, I'm lucky to be here because, and I am 110% convinced. My doctor 6 months ago, I talked to him about this and he was about 50-50, but I think now what's come out about AstraZeneca being banned for causing exactly what happened to me, I think I'm going to go and see him in the next day or two. I am seriously keen on starting a lawsuit against AstraZeneca myself, because I shouldn't have had to go through what I did, and I'm lucky to be here.
So it's all right for the rank and file to complain about all this, but there's some very high profile sports people who have
many
suffered from it, and some of them passed away. I think you mentioned Marvin Hagler, did
Marvin Hagler, the great Marvin Hagler, dropped dead. He collapsed and was taken to ICU, and then a couple of days later they let him go home, and he just dropped dead at home. And
how are they able to sheet that home to the vaccine?
Good question. I mean, it hasn't. It's just been talked about, and nothing's happened over it. And you know, Marvin Hagler was one of the greatest fighters of all time, and a super healthy guy. I met him in Vegas, you know, a few years before he passed away, and he looked in terrific condition. And yeah, you know, it's just another one of the many people that and famous people too that, you know, have had side effects from the vaccine. There's going to be much more. You know, there's that big article in the Herald Sun about the class action in the UK over the AstraZeneca people, you know, and the Ellis camp. They've got quite a few gyms. They've told me the amount of young people that they had collapsed, that didn't drink or smoke, collapse after the needles and rush to hospital with heart issues, and you know, causes myocarditis, you know, blockages, all sorts of things, and it's becoming more and more prevalent.
Just for my own edification, who was the famous fighters? Hagler fought. What was the other man?
Marvin Hagler fought Sugar Ray twice.
Sugar Ray Leonard.
Yeah.
No, what was it?
Sorry, he fought Sugar Ray once, and it was Marvin
Hagler, and marvellous Marvin Hagler fought three times. Another man, famous man.
Roberto Duran. He beat Duran on points. Only fought him once.
No, I got that right. No,
Who
you
else
haven't
did he
mentioned him
fight?
yet.
Let me think.
So.
But Marvin Hagler was one of the greatest middleweights of all time.
Yeah, I've watched. Seen him.
Southpaw and.
Is it unlawful? So if the government decree that COVID's back and you've got to have vaccinations again, and you can't get into a restaurant and you can't go out there unless you, or the health department, is it unlawful for people like you or me or Dr. Robbie Peterson to advise people to refrain from getting any further vaccines?
That's a very good question, Sam.
Can you be rounded up for I don't know, being a conspiracy theorist?
Yeah, well, I don't think it would be illegal. It just, as we know, when we went through the pandemic, if you weren't vaccinated, you were treated like a leper. There's a very good friend of mine Glenn Walsh, a former boxer, one of my great sparring partners, he refused to be vaccinated, and his whole family turned on him, and it was terrible to watch. And you know, some of them have had some side effects since too. But yeah, there's quite a few people I know that weren't vaccinated, and I mean, it was interesting to hear what Dr. Peterson
Novak
said.
Djokovic wasn't allowed in here, and suddenly he was back. Yeah,
good on him for standing up for his rights. I mean, I think it was terrible that we were forced. Everyone was forced, and it was just. Look, I've had COVID twice, and the first time I got it, I was double vaccinated, and I've never had a worse sore throat in my life. But I wasn't real crook, and I've probably had worse flus. But the second time I got it was a year or so after I had a vaccination, and I tested positive for 5 days, and the only issues I had was hay fever, and ever since then I've had really bad hay fever. But I was over it in 5 days, and I had no really serious effects from it.
I think the moral of the story, though, is that you should be always getting checked, because I think 3 of my good friends have either had blockages, have had put stents in, or bypasses.
Yep.
One's only 32, one's in his 40s, and the other one's mid-50s.
That's crazy.
And it is. And I think 2 of them are unvaccinated, 1 was vaccinated. So it's going to happen to anyone, because health doesn't discriminate, I guess. So it's really important. I think a good friend of yours has just gone in on Tuesday to have a heart operation or a heart check, because he just went and checked, and then they
That's
found
correct.
out. So
Yep.
I think people should be, or men should be, a lot more vigilant.
Yeah, well,
and
it's certainly been a
checked.
real prevalence of heart issues ever since the vaccine, much more. And it was interesting to hear what Dr. Peterson also said, that the incidence of all types of cancers has gone through the roof as well, which, you know, I mean, it's just crazy.
Yeah, the world's gone mad.
The world has gone mad.
I'm trying to find who. I thought Marvin Hagler.
It's doing your head in, isn't it?
It's annoying me. So Barry, this has been.
Sam, you want me to bring his record up? Just give me a
Yeah,
minute.
I'm googling it at the minute. Marvelous Marvin Hagler fought.
His last fight was a disputed loss to the great Sugar Ray Leonard.
Was it Sugar Ray Leonard? I didn't think it was Sugar Ray Leonard.
No, he only fought Sugar Ray the once, I think.
Whiz.
But I'll tell you.
Anyhow, while we're doing this, shit, I can't find it.
Good on you.
Right.
If you want to look on anything with boxing, go to Box Rec.
Anyhow, can't find it.
I'll find it in about
Doesn't
a
matter.
second. Hang on 1 second.
Well, you have to hurry because we're going to...
Okay, it'll only give me
No, that's all right.
Marvelous Marvin Hagler Box Rec, 5'8", 62 wins, 3 losses, 2 draws. 50.
Who did he lose to?
He lost to-
one of these to this person I'm trying to think of.
Yeah, well, his last loss was, the only
Kevin
loss that
Finnegan?
the only loss that you would realise was his very last fight. Tommy Hearns, he knocked out.
Tommy
He knocked Tommy.
Hearns.
He knocked Tommy Hearns
No,
out
that's
in
the
3.
man.
He,
Hearns, Hagler.
Yeah,
They were legendary fights. How many times did he fight him?
no, I think he only fought Tommy the once.
Oh,
and
did he?
He knocked him out. He knocked Tommy out in 3 rounds.
Oh,
Then he
so-
knocked out John McGarvey in 11 rounds.
Tommy Hearns was the man I was thinking of.
And then his last fight was on the 6th of the 4th, 1987, and he lost a split decision over 12 rounds to the great Ray Leonard. Thought he was robbed and never fought again. Retired. But what a record he's got there. Roy Jones, he stopped Roy Jones in 3.
Roy
That was in-
Jones, Manny Pacquiao. I know he
No,
didn't
no,
fight.
Manny's-
No, I know he
Manny's
didn't fight
too
him,
small.
but what a fighter he was.
Manny Pacquiao, incredible fighter. The only person who I think will ever win eight different weight
Yep.
divisions from
Yep.
around about, in the old language, from about 8 stone
Yep.
to 11 stone. 8 different weight divisions.
And
It's just unheard of.
And
Yeah.
a bit like you, Barry. Manny Pacquiao is a member of the government over
Yes,
in
he-
Thailand.
yes.
Where is he? Thai?
No, Philippines.
Philippines?
He actually ran for the presidency last year.
Did he?
Yeah, when
He would have bloody near got there.
well, he
wouldn't
didn't get it, and it was hard to believe. One of the I think grandchildren of the Marcos family is now the president.
Oh, I see.
Which I would have thought
And
rather.
I say a
rather
parallel
surprising.
career to you, Barry, because you had a crack at the Palmer United Party for the Senate in 2013.
Yes, I did, and to be honest with you, Clive, I'm still a great believer of thinking he would have been a terrific leader for the country because he's
Yep.
a genius in his own right and a self-made billionaire. And with a lot of principle, but I think he ruined his any chance of doing anything because he made some bad cracks at Rupert Murdoch, and you just can't do that. But with me, he turned on me because about a week or so before the election, I did an interview on radio, and I was asking, should Mick Gatto be allowed to have a promoter's licence? And I said, well, let's be realistic. I said, Mick Gatto was a fighter himself. He fought on the prelims, on some of the shows I fought on, and I said He's never been convicted of a major crime. I said he was charged with a murder and was found not guilty on the grounds of self-defence. I said he had a minor conviction 20 years ago and hadn't had any other serious convictions. And I said the biggest promoter in world history is probably Don King.
Yep.
He's done time for murder and numbers racketeering, and he's actually done time for 2 murders. So I said, well, based on those statistics, I think, Mick knows the fight game. And I tried to tell Mick that he cost me the election, but he just couldn't understand it because Clive turned against me and I didn't get a single preference. I forget the figure, but I got well over 100,000 votes, and I lost to Ricky Muir, who got 2,500, and I lost on preferences. Well, because Clive turned against me, and I didn't get preferences from Family First or anyone because of what I said about Mick. But anyway, that's another story.
Yeah, no, we've had Mick on the podcast here and spoken to him about...
Mick and I get along fine.
No, Mick's good. I get on very well with Mick. Treat people as you find them. He's a very good man. Mick, seriously. Now, Barry, I was going to... Yeah, I know your son's doing it tough at the minute. Must be tough on you as a father. Zach is...
locked up.
Oh, well, he's locked up, mate. So,
And, this is something I'd like to say to all the parents out there. This drug ice, it's just destroying communities. What I saw in America last year, a whole suburb with just people, they're on meth. It's just the lowest drug on earth. It just it turns people into psychopaths, makes them violent. It is actually it's the lowest drug of all time. What it does to people.
Yeah, well, we hope that takes a turn for the better in your life, Barry.
Well, he should be out relatively soon, and he's passed some psychological examinations inside, and hopefully he's going to be okay. But ice does cause permanent damage. It's I won't even go into the drugs, what other drugs do, but ice, methamphetamine causes serious long-term damage, psychological damage. Changes people's personalities, and it's the lowest drug. And they've got to seriously start coming down a lot heavier on the big dealers.
The great Barry Michael Swettenham. Great Barry Michael. So thank you very much for joining us on You Cannot Be Serious, Barry.
Thank you, Sam. It's a pleasure. It's great to see you too, Sue, and thank you so much, Sam. You're doing a wonderful job. And my boxing podcast will be kicking off again shortly. We've had a break because my wife passed away May 7th, and my partner Bruce Eva has been quite busy, but I'm going to, till Bruce is ready, I'm going to start doing some myself. I've got Nikita Zoo through Glenn Jennings, who's the zoo managers. I'm going to interview both the zoo boys and many others.
And if you would like the Ellis Michael combination to come and regale you with some stories and about boxing, whether they make them up or they're real, you can ring Barry on 0413 654 999. How easy is that? 654 999 0413.
Yep, exactly, Sam. Thank you so much.
You're a legend.